All right, welcome to the weekly Solar Surge live sales training. Folks, we're here streaming out live every Wednesday, 3 p.m. Eastern, goes out to YouTube, Facebook, and LinkedIn as well. And by the way, the reason that we do these live trainings is not just to provide value, but also to make sure that you all have an opportunity to pose your questions and comments. And we're going to do our best to have those questions answered in real time. So if you have a question related to solar sales or the solar sales business, go ahead and put it in the chat feed or in the comment on the post, and we're going to be answering those questions in real time. My co-host is back, Dan Freshley, CEO of Radiant Solar. We're kind of back to our normal routine here after Las Vegas and all the new stuff that we checked out and have been covering for you from RE Plus. Dan, it's really good to see you again. I'm really looking forward to do this training with you as well, because I know this is a topic that I've been sort of teasing for the last month, which is, hey, we're gonna teach you what we know about the lease and why the lease is really the preferred financing option given the current solar market and current interest rate environment. So Dan, welcome back, and looking forward to do the training with you. Dan, I think you're on mute.
There you go. Helps if you do a quick little audio check ahead of time, huh? Rookies. Anyways, thanks, Joe. I appreciate it. And I know this has been a topic we've been, teasing, as you said, for a little while. But in all seriousness, I mean, it is something that's very relevant. Over my career, 8 years in the industry, I've done very, very, very little leasing. And frankly, I would say that I've actually sold against leasing for quite some time. But look, economies shift and interest rates climb, and money's more expensive to borrow, whatever it is. And so different things come out where there might be more advantageous options. So I'm excited to get into this and really unpack it and even figure out more about how I can apply it into my own, day-to-day business activities.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And I think that really is the backdrop for all of this, is that we have interest rates, as you all know, interest rates have risen faster this year than at really any time in history, just in terms of the aggressiveness of how fast the central bank is hiking interest rates. I saw a headline on Bloomberg this morning that home mortgage interest rates, the average home mortgage interest rate is now approaching 8%. And so, when you talk about a solar loan, most of us who have been in the solar industry for a while, we're used to selling solar loans. But typically, if you've been doing this for the past 5 or 6 years, we had been offering interest rates in the range of maybe 2.99% to 4.99%. And we were able to offer those loans over terms of 20 or 25 years. And so the way that worked out for many homeowners is that they could do 100% financing on their solar system and end up with a lower monthly payment to pay for the solar than what they would have had if they just stuck with the power company. So in terms of making the sales pitch, making the value proposition, it was very simply like, hey, do you want to rent your power or do you want to own your power? Right? Many people choose to own their home with a mortgage. They can maybe keep their monthly housing expense about the same level. But over time, with a home mortgage, you build up equity and you protect yourself from future inflation. And that was essentially the same offer that we were making people for their energy. Hey, don't rent your energy, buy your energy. Even if you have to finance it, we'll give you a low interest fixed monthly payment that's lower than what you're throwing away to the power company anyway. And then eventually you pay it off and you have free power. And Dan, for you and I here on the East Coast, that was the basic pitch, right? It was like the bill swap. We weren't saying, hey, you're going to save, cut your bill in half. It was more like, hey, if you're paying 150, 200 bucks a month to the power company now, why not just pay that to yourself in the form of paying off your solar loan? And then eventually you'll own it and you'll have free power. Well, that worked when we could finance the systems at 3, 4, 5% interest. But now if we're looking to do those same solar loans, we're looking at 8, 9, 10% interest. And so the monthly payment, if you're just comparing monthly payment of a solar finance payment, a solar loan payment versus what the homeowner is paying to the power company, now in many cases they may have to pay more to switch to solar. And so it's really just not as attractive as an option. Now, with the lease, that's not the case. And so let me put this on the screen here, because there's a few key points that differentiate the lease versus the financing. And the first point is it's going to be the lowest monthly payment possible. I'm running multiple lease proposals every week. I actually just sent one out to a homeowner in Jacksonville earlier this afternoon. And what we're seeing is that the lease monthly payments, same system, same payment to the installer. And we'll talk about the structure here in a moment. But that the lease payments are actually about a third lower than what the loan financing payment would be. And so I think if you're used to selling on the immediate cash flow and the monthly payment savings, the lease is going to offer you the lowest monthly payment options. And I have some examples I can show you here later in the broadcast. But Dan, at this point, I'll throw it over to you. Any feedback on?
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. And one thing I wanted to chime in, and I didn't want to break your train of thought there, but I think it is important, guys, if we take a really quick step back. I've talked about this in some other trainings, but the value of what we sell, right, as solar, as a service, as a product to homeowners, we have to put that in context as compared to other sales type professions and sales activities. And what I mean by that, and I've said this before, but solar really is incredibly unique, frankly, from one perspective, the easiness of what it is to accomplish that sale. And here's the reason why I say that. Name another product or service out there that a homeowner or an individual or just a regular person is not having to increase their cost to acquire that service, right? For example, if I want to go get a new car, most of the time that means my monthly expenses have now increased, but I wanted to drive this particular vehicle and I had a reason in my mind that I could justify why I wanted to make that purchase. If I wanted to buy a home, and I wanted to upgrade my home, maybe I'm going from a townhome to a single family home, most of the time that means that my costs are going to increase, right? My expenses are going up. And it could be other things too, right? Maybe it's not something that you have on a monthly payment basis, but maybe it's someone's offering to sell you a product that costs $5,000. Well, in order for you to purchase that, you have to part ways with $5,000 of your own money that you're not going to see back. Instead, you're going to get back in return the product that you're exchanging that value for. Solar is very different, right? Solar is very different in the sense that this is something that every single homeowner and renter, but we're really only able to sell to homeowners. Every single homeowner in the US is already paying for, right? We're already paying for electrical costs every single month. So sometimes you have to kind of remember that from a sales, professional perspective and say, hey, look, the service that I'm providing to you, whether you choose to go solar or not, you're already paying for this, right? The money's already going out the door. Wealthy or poor, it doesn't matter. You have a monthly utility bill. Now, the goal really, and I view it as more of a service sale than it is maybe a product sale, is that the goal is you're trying to help them own and control something at a lower cost. And sometimes when I say own in this respect, I'm also actually referring to, you could lease the system, which you don't technically own, but you're getting the end service of utility provide, power to your home, energy being produced that you can use at a lower cost. And so kind of keep that in mind as we work through this and talk about that. Things have changed, obviously, like Joe was already alluding to in the economy, but the value of somebody going solar is, look, you already have this expense. So you can never, the objection of, oh, I can't afford it is 100% irrelevant, 100% irrelevant, right? So we as sales professionals have to learn how to overcome that objection. But the simple reality of it is anytime someone says, oh, I can't afford it, or I don't have it in my budget, or something else to the financial objection point, it's a very mute point, because the reality of it is you're already paying for this. You're already paying for it in power bills. In fact, us helping you go solar, in this case, especially with the lease, I think I can confidently probably say 10 times out of 10 will reduce your monthly cost, unless you were installing a system on a home that was just so bad for solar that it doesn't make sense, right? Shading problems or whatever it may be. But this will be a monthly reduction for somebody. So the whole I can't afford it is a 100% cop out, not a real objection. You just have to learn how to properly say that in a professional way and overcome that, and make sure they understand that. Make sure your prospect understands that. So I just wanted to kind of chime in on that point there, Joe.
Yeah, no, always good to reinforce that, because again, price is not the issue. Price is not the issue 99% of the time, because if they can afford to pay a power bill like they're doing now, they can afford anything that you're going to offer. It's going to be better for them long term, even if it's a lease and not an ownership. And that's the other thing with the lease as well, is that you are going to find for many of the lease companies that the credit requirements are lower than with traditional bank financing or with a traditional loan financing. And so this also may help guys with some of the credit fails, where not only can you get the customer a lower monthly payment, but you can actually qualify some customers that otherwise wouldn't qualify with some of the traditional solar lenders, companies like Dividend or Mosaic, for example. Not all leasing companies are the same. A lot of the example I'm going to show you guys today is with Sunnova, which I believe is the biggest solar lease company. And it's the one that we're using the most in terms of outbound proposal volume. And I'll show you a little bit some of this, what their proposal looks like here on the screen in a moment. But each leasing company has its own standards, but in general, I think you're going to find you're going to get more approvals.
Absolutely. Yeah, I think that's
So
a big part too, Joe, to go to that point. So if you want to, we can either jump back into those key points, or I know there's been a couple questions that have flowed in here from Ryan.
yeah, let's go to the question from Ryan here, because by the way, Ryan is one of our Solar Surge University students, and so Ryan's asking here: Sunnova offers a 25-year warranty on everything, including battery, correct? Because the system is owned by Sunnova and the warranty is backed by Sunnova. How is the post-install servicing of their warranty? So that's a great question, Ryan, and thank you for the engagement. That's actually one of the points I was going to be getting to, but since you raised the question, I'll just go ahead and address this now. So another advantage of the lease is the fact that since you don't own the equipment, you as the homeowner are not really responsible for any maintenance of the equipment, right? If there's any repairs or maintenance needed on the solar equipment, it's at the leasing company's expense to make whatever those repairs or maintenance are. Now, typically, if you're doing solar purchase, even purchase with a loan, typically you are going to have a 25-year guarantee from the local installation contractor. But, Dan, as you know, and many of you watching this know, the failure rate among solar contractors is high. And so there's a lot of homeowners out there where they had the system installed and the installer offered them a 25-year guarantee, but now the installer is out of business and there's no one to honor the warranty claim. So now the homeowner has to go hire another contractor and pay, in some cases, pay several $1,000s to have them fix or repair or replace equipment on their defective solar system. Now, with a lease system, you have an extra layer of protection. Now, you should still have primary warranty service from your local installation company, because the way these leases are structured, the local installer is getting paid by the lease company just like they would get paid by the bank once they've installed the system. So they should still honor their guarantee. But since the leasing company themselves are guaranteeing the system performance for the entire lease term, which is typically 25 years, then if the original installing contractor goes out of business, the lease company just goes to another one of their enrolled contractors and have that contractor perform the service. So I think it does give a certain an extra level of protection for the homeowner. I actually have a slide I'm going to share with you in a little bit, showing exactly sort of what those key benefits of the Sunnova warranty are. But I mean, basically, you have the backing of the finance company guaranteeing the warranty claims, whereas a warranty from a local install contractor, again, that contractor may do great business. They may be in business for many years, but many contractors fail, which means that the warranties that they had issued pretty much fail with them. Dan, your thoughts?
Yeah, no, I think that's a really great point. There was a comment that just came in here from Lance B as well that said here in California, Sunnova has their own team of warranty service people, which is cool. If that is the case, then obviously Sunnova has realized there's an importance in making sure that they have a team that addresses these issues. I'm not sure if that's the case in every market or if that's maybe just in California. Maybe it's even just regionalized in California, given how large the state is. But the point of it being is that to you as the homeowner, when you're investing in the product and service, in this case, you're not the one that is ultimately financially liable for issues, or the most common one. I mean, I know from the years, and you've heard us talk a lot about this on the Solar Surge channel, the first and most important step, and I still do 100% believe this. Do not misunderstand this next statement as, oh, I can just choose any contractor, because I can assure you that is not the case. You still need a reliable partner. But there's not maybe as high of an importance in that respect of now saying, okay, hey, if something happens, Sunnova is the one that's on the hook. Now, I can tell you that Sunnova is a smart company. They're not going to be partnering. And I don't know exactly what all the behind the scenes are, but I'm sure that there are various qualifications on a contractor level to being included in Sunnova's ability to offer Sunnova's products, right? I'm sure there's checks and balances that play into consideration there. But for what it's worth, I mean, there's a little bit of a teaching point on that there too, Joe. A lot of the clients that we work with are cash customers. But I will say that over the years, I have found that when there is a problem with a contractor, sometimes it's better to actually be the finance customer than it is the cash customer. Because when you're the finance customer, or in this case, a lease customer with Sunnova, there's still another party that has an interest in your project, right? And so what I have seen over the years is maybe there's a contractor that went belly up or was defunct. the homeowner has the ability to go back to the financing company and essentially just say, hey, look, I'm not paying for this because I have a product that is not working currently. And there's a little bit of a stopgap there. So I think this is a huge potential value section for having the lease, is that you have a third party, in this case, Sunnova, or whoever the leasing party may be, that allows, that has access to a network of other installers that can make right on a project, even if your original contractor goes out of business. Again, don't misunderstand that for saying, oh, I can go with anybody. As we talked about, I still think the number one most important decision is the contracting partner you choose to work with, and then sort of the inverter platform and ecosystem, as we've talked about. But that is a nice peace of mind measure that plays in there when it comes to a leasing scenario.
Yeah, and that's a great point that you made there too, Dan, is that, a lot of times the solar finance companies, and again, for those of you who don't necessarily know some of the risk that the finance companies take behind the scenes, part of the reason why the dealer fees are so high right now for solar loans is because the solar finance companies have to keep larger reserves to make up for contractor defaults. The contractor could default on not installing the project, and then the finance company has to hire another contractor to finish the project. Or the contractor could default on warranty service, after the install is complete, as Dan mentioned. Well, if the homeowner calls the bank and says, hey, look, I'm not making another payment until you fix my solar system, then the finance company may have to go out and hire another contractor to go over there and make repairs. So again, that's part of the reason, why behind the scenes you're seeing the dealer fees as high as they are. And there are other reasons as well. The rising interest rates, and interest rates rising that fast, is a big part of it. But that's also a part of it too, is that the finance company, in many ways, is going to advocate for your system to be repaired, because they don't want your solar loan to default, which is a whole nother set of problems.
Yeah, and a lot of this too, though, I mean, just for a knowledge point too, for those that maybe have a more granular interest in economics and such, a lot of these loans are getting packaged into hedge fund investment accounts and pension funds and things like that. I know a couple of the banks that we work with, they're rolled up into, I think it's like a teacher's fund. So a lot of these solar products, the way the banks are using those loans is the loan might come from GoodLeap per se, but GoodLeap might turn around and reallocate that loan to another, financial firm that's using that and using the proceeds of that and the interest from that to pay out pension dollars. So all of it's kind of intertwined. And so as interest rates were really, really low back in the 2020 and 2021 timeframe, and then rates skyrocketed so high, there was massive deficits that had to be made up for because they just weren't as attractive to have. So that's a separate conversation and much more granular economic conversation, but that's a little bit of why dealer fees have swung the way that they have.
Yeah, if you guys want to learn more about that particular topic, go back and watch Solar Surge podcast. I believe it was podcast number 19 with Andy Sendy, the CEO of Solar Reviews, where he was sharing with us a lot of sort of the internals of what's going on with these solar finance companies, and some of the risks that they take when they offer financing at a certain rate, have to hold the loan for 6 or 9 months before it gets sold off. And if interest rates have swung significantly in that 6 or 9 month holding period, they could incur additional losses. So he does a much better job of explaining it than I could, for those that really want to dig into that issue. But the long and short of it is, the leasing company provides an extra level of protection for the homeowner, in the form of the warranty, right? If the original contractor, for whatever reason, cannot or will not perform warranty service, the leasing company will, at their own expense, go out and hire another contractor to fix the system and get it back online, because part of the lease agreement is the power production guarantee, right? And with a lease system, you're getting the power production guarantee, again, from the leasing company, not from the contractor. So the leasing company is on the hook to make sure that system performs. And that's what you're going to see here. Now, the next key advantage here, as far as the lease goes, sorry, Dan, let me bump you for a second, is that there's no tax credit requirement. And so, with a solar loan financing, for those of you who've sold solar loans, that the monthly payment that you're given during the introductory period, which is usually the first 12 months or the first 18 months, it assumes that the homeowner is going to capture the entire 30% federal tax credit and apply that to the bank so they can keep the low monthly payment going forward. So that's sort of a best case scenario. That the solar loan estimated monthly payment assumes full tax credit is applied within year one. And what I've heard talking to some of the solar finance company executives offline is that only about 25% or so of people actually capture the full tax credit and make the full pay down within the grace period, which means that their solar loan payment bumps up. With a lease, you don't have to worry about that. There's no tax credit requirement. The leasing company is able to take advantage of the tax credit through some type of financial engineering that happens on their side. But the reality is it doesn't really matter what the homeowner's tax liability is, or the homeowner is not required to file any forms or make any pay downs. It's pretty much all taken care of for them by the leasing company. So this is also really helpful too, because there are many retirees out there. They're on Social Security. They just don't have enough taxable income to be able to take the full tax credit, or to take it in as accelerated a pace as you would want to. Or I've talked to some folks who are military disabled, and so their income is not taxable, and so they want solar. They I've talked to many of them. They like the whole idea of being energy independent, more energy secure, but they just can't take advantage of the tax credit. So the lease solves this problem as well. Dan, I'll throw it back to you.
Yeah, I just wanted to jump in. I think that is a major plus to have, even if you just kind of look at it as a professional, as a solar professional, having different tools in your belt that you can use given different circumstances and scenarios. What I've oftentimes seen over the years is I would say that my average client that I've worked with probably is around the age of 60 is probably what I would guess. But that means that that's an average, right? So there's quite a bit of people that are older than that that might already be in retirement years, might be living off of a fixed income, Social Security, whatever it may be. And oftentimes it might be those individuals that their incomes are not going up anymore, but their power bill as appliances age and the home gets older is going to continue to increase, let alone obviously with inflation and with other policy factors. So oftentimes the no tax credit scenario could be ultimately the most compelling reason to use a lease, because sometimes it's the people that need it the most, that need the bill savings, that need something that's more flat and predictable, that could stand to benefit the greatest from a lease. Now, there are some other things, and maybe we'll unpack this a little further, where certain states won't allow leasing, right? Because there can be a little bit more of a predatory environment with leasing, because it can be sold and spun in a way where, oh yeah, you're just trading your bill for something cheaper, but not really explaining things in a proper and an articulate enough way that they understand what the real impact and cost would be. So I know, for example, in my home state here in Virginia, we don't have leasing options currently available. Our options in Virginia are traditional solar financing or cash purchases, but both of those are considered ownership. One of them being a loan, one of them just being an outright, purchase. So there is a little bit of area there that I think can be tremendously beneficial, but it also, like we always preach and talk about, it has to be done the right way. It has to be done above board, ethically and transparently. So don't think you can just go running around, selling leases and taking advantage of people. So that's a big part that needs to be acknowledged.
Of course, and that's part of the ethical professional sales process that we teach here, is make sure that you have the best and most accurate and fully disclose all this information at the time of sale. There's a question that just came in here from Solar Guy, and he's saying every solar consultant is saying how great the lease is. If that's the case, then what is the benefit of the traditional solar loan today? And then he follows up with, I guess what I'm asking is, how do you pivot from one to the other? So thank you for that question. I mean, frankly, I don't know that there's much advantage to the traditional loan today, unless the homeowner really wants to take advantage of the solar tax credit, right? Or if they really want to own the system at a more accelerated rate. They don't intend to make monthly payments for any prolonged period of time. They just need a bridge for 12 or 18 months, but they really want to own the system and take the full tax credit advantage. Then the solar loan is still a good solution for that. But I think for a homeowner who's financing for the purposes of maximizing cash flow, the lease is going to be the most cash flow positive option. And I should say, again, I'm not a financial expert here, but I should say, I don't know that it's always going to be this good. From what I do know of leasing companies is that they're not banks, so they're not lending their own money, right? They have to go borrow, they have to raise capital of their own. from what I understand. So these increased interest rates that the economy at large is experiencing, the leasing companies may have to react to that at some point in the near future. So I don't know if the conditions are always going to be as good as they are right now, but they're very good right now. And to answer the second part of your question, Solar Guy, and then Dan, I'm going to kick it to you here. But when you say how do you pivot from one to the other, what I'm personally doing when I deliver my presentations now is I show them the cash price, the loan monthly payment, and the lease monthly payment all on one proposal. I just have it all on one page proposal, and I explain to them sort of the pros and cons of each, and then let them sort of choose which way they would like to go from here. And what I'm getting, the feedback I'm getting is, hey, Joe, I think the lease is going to be the right thing for me. More times than not, that's what I'm hearing. Dan, what do you think?
Yeah, I think that's a good question too. I think you hit the nail on the head right there earlier when you said if you're doing this for cash flow purposes, then I would say hands down leasing is the way to go right now. Right? Because the reality of it is if you're looking at this from a cash flow oriented perspective, you're trying to figure out how can I reduce my expenses and have the most positive cash flow. I would pivot and say this great question, Solar Guy, but I think this is a very similar analogy to how people have different outlooks financially on how they purchase cars, how they purchase houses, how they purchase other assets versus liabilities conversations, right? For example, there's a lot of people out there that they believe when they buy a car, they want to have the money in the bank, they want to go write a check, and it's the one payment plan, right? Because it's a depreciating asset. That's what people would say. Now, on the other side, there's people that say, hey, look, the car serves its purpose for me. And if I just need to make the monthly payment, but that amount of money I would have allocated to buying the car, let's just say it was a $50,000 car. If I can take that $50,000 and go invest it, allow it to grow and produce something for me, and my investment can pay for the liability of the car payment, then I'd rather do that. Both of those are very sound financial thought processes. And really it comes down to, frankly, in my opinion, which one do you have greater peace about, right? Which one do you feel more comfortable with? Are you afraid of the debt and the loan payment, or are you afraid of the missed opportunity? That would be opportunity cost, right? Of not taking the money and instead, putting it into the car. So I think kind of the same thing goes here, right? Like if you're somebody like Joe said, I don't think financing from a 25-year term perspective makes as much sense right now, unless you had it at a lower interest rate. The problem is, though, with the lower interest rates, you typically are going to have a significantly higher contracted price because of the financing fees and dealer fees that get added into it. So if you're comparing long-term payment plans, financing versus leasing is probably going to be the better option, especially in today's current market environment. But if someone wants to use the financing for a means of paying it off in a 1 to maybe 5 year period of time, because their main goal was about just owning it outright, they just didn't have the money or capital at hand to be able to write the check for it at once, then I think financing can make sense there. I know for me, for Joe, you probably would say this, a lot of the financing that we're offering today is at higher interest rates because that's the no fee financing, right? It's the no closing cost. So it's the easy way to tell the homeowner, hey, look, this is the same as cash price. However, I always tell our homeowners, if you're planning on paying this monthly, do not take this loan, right? Use this loan as a means of paying this off aggressively because you get it at the cash price. If you want an option, and this is before leasing, right? But I would say if you want an option for monthly payments, then you actually need to go with the lower interest rate, higher contract price because of the fees. And I'll show them how this pencils over a longer period of time. So the lease is a better option for that type of person. For the cash flow oriented, lower monthly payment person, the lease is going to be a better option for that.
Absolutely. Another question from Ryan here. And again, Ryan, thank you for the engagement. He's asking, what happens if the customer pays off the system before the 18-month promotional period? They still have to pay the dealer fee markup. And Ryan, yes, the answer for that is yes. If you use a finance product that have dealer fees, in other words, you're paying fees or points to buy down the interest rate, there's no way to recover those points once the loan is funded. In fact, all of the dealer fees are taken immediately as the loan is funded, and the contractor is just paid whatever's remaining after the fees. So
Exactly.
again, this is what you're talking about, Dan. This is why I'm having a transparent conversation about the financial intentions of the buyer is important to do that during the discovery process, during the sales process, because if the homeowner does not intend to keep the financing long term, there may not be any reason to use any dealer fees or to seek a lower interest rate if really all they need is a short term bridge and then they're going to pay it off anyway.
Yeah, and a practical question, guys, if you can take something away, I'll ask this question a lot of times because sometimes early on, me trying to explain everything I was just explaining can, cause a little bit of analysis paralysis, right? They don't want it, it makes them confused, and the confused mind says no. But sometimes a simple question I'll ask is, hey, so Joe, regarding the financial side of this, how are you looking to make your investment? Are you looking to pay cash? Are you looking for financing? What were you thinking? And I'll kind of pause, wait to hear what they say. Someone might deliberately right away say, I'm paying cash. Then I'm like, okay, good. Don't need to talk about it anymore. They had their mind made up. They said it very intentionally. They knew what they wanted. But sometimes if they say, I think I might pay cash, but I'd be open to looking at financing, what I'll then go into the next question sometimes be, okay, great. Yeah, there's a ton of financing options. Hey, question for you. When you typically buy a car or a larger purchase, are you the more aggressive payoff kind of person, or do you typically just look for the monthly payment? And what I'm asking there right then is like, if they look for the monthly payment, they might be someone who's a better candidate for the low interest rate, higher dealer fee because they care about payments. But if there's somebody that is like, hey, I'm the more aggressive payoff person, then I probably am going to say, okay, cool. So we have an option that is same as cash price. Now it will have a higher interest rate. And then I might begin to explain a little bit of how that works, right? You can get the interest rate lower, Joe, but you're going to have to pay points and it gets really expensive. So what I would recommend is we take the same as cash financing, higher interest rate. But if you pay this off fast, you pay it off in 12 months, 18 months, 24 months, you're going to pay some money in interest, obviously, but the amount you pay in interest will be far less than what you would pay in your point buy down if you went with a lower interest rate. And then I can kind of begin to explain that to them. But the main question I'll ask there, if they ask about financing, is, hey, are you the pay off the car fast person, or are you the monthly payment person? That gives me a good idea as to which way they're going to kind of evaluate this decision. And then I can choose, strategically what options I want to show them. And I'm typically, you already mentioned this before, Joe, but I'm typically showing a couple of options. Unless someone very clearly says I'm paying cash, I'll show them cash. I might show them a same as cash. I might show them a certain financing, or in this case now too, if I figure out that they're the payment person, that's where I might pivot to the conversation about a lease instead, because here's the benefits for you as the homeowner.
Right, right. And I also like what you said there, Dan, kind of drawing some analogies to financing that they're going to be more familiar with, like auto loans or home mortgages, right? A lot of folks are familiar with the concept of you can buy down the interest rate of an auto loan. That means you pay a higher price, right? Or you pay closing costs when you have a mortgage. Or maybe if you do a no closing cost mortgage, you have to pay a higher interest rate. So if you can have this conversation, or at least try to have it using terms that they're already familiar with, I find that helps to keep people on track. When you start talking about dealer fees and things like that, a lot of times, homeowners will push back because, again, the confused mind always says no. So if you throw that term dealer fees in there and they don't understand what that means, that a lot of times that could be a reason why you don't close the transaction, is they want to push back and to go do some more research and figure out what it is exactly you're talking about.
Yeah, I definitely don't recommend saying dealer fee, just because I don't think there's a real positive connotation that goes with that at all. And look, I mean, the reality of it is it's not positive anyways, but they're in every type of loan. Every loan that's out there, there are some sort of dealer fee. The bank is making their money. They have to cover their costs to underwrite the loans, to originate them, to process them, to handle them, right? So they're in the loans, but I like using those terminologies that people are familiar with of, hey, there's a rate buy down, or you're buying points, or there's closing costs, right? Those are things that people are like, oh, okay, so my price could have been 20,000, but now my price is 30,000 because of those fees. And yes, the answer is yes, that's how that works. So I explain it in that type of term. And I would be weary of saying dealer fee, because I think it just causes a little bit of confusion because they're not familiar with what that means. But for the sales professionals that are in the industry, that is the term that gets used. We call them dealer fees. And so you need to know what that is and then know how to properly articulate that to your customer as well.
Exactly. All right. So if we go back to our list here, so number 4, we talked about the no tax requirement. So number 4, and we've touched on this a little bit because of Ryan's question, but no maintenance cost or no maintenance risk for the homeowner, right? Pretty much all the risk, all the burden of keeping the system healthy is on the leasing company itself. And I'm going to put this on the screen here now. So this is the Sunnova Lease, the 25-year guarantee. And I don't know if this is large enough that you guys can read all of it, but basically what this is saying is that For 25 years, they're going to do system monitoring, they're going to do diagnostics, they're going to pay for any repairs that might be needed on the roof, and they're going to provide a 10-year warranty on the roof leak as well. So if the homeowner thinks there's a roof leak related to solar, they just have to report that within the first 10 years after the installation. So this is what Sunnova, as the leasing company, is putting themselves on the hook for, right? 25-year equipment, 25-year power production guarantee, and this is really a new thing. But and if you have batteries as part of your solar installation, they will actually replace the batteries halfway through the lease term. Right now, most batteries only have a 10, 12. Actually, Enphase just up theirs to 15, but most batteries right now just have a 10 or 12-year warranty. And so since Sunnova is guaranteeing the performance of the system over the entire 25-year lease, they will actually replace the batteries with new batteries halfway through the lease term. This is really unprecedented for me, because if I look at the numbers on it, what they charge, which is about $2,500 per battery to do that free battery replacement in year 12, you're essentially getting 2 batteries for every one that's on your original installation agreement. Again, to make sure that you have a fully functioning system over the entire 25-year term. And I should touch on another thing too, is that having battery storage friendly leases is also a relatively new thing. And that's, frankly, Dan, probably why we shied away from them back in the day, since we were doing 50%, 50% attachment rate on our solar projects, is that the leasing companies historically wanted to keep the total cost per kilowatt hour of the lease down within a certain range. And so when you start adding on the cost of batteries on top of that, it just throws the economics off. But now the leases are all storage friendly, where they treat the battery as like a separate item, that they have a financing structure that's friendly to adding batteries. In fact, in California, virtually all the new systems are having batteries now, and we're able to wrap those into the lease as well. So maybe you're dealing with a homeowner that wants to have solar, not just for electric bill savings, but they really want to have that true energy independence for emergency backup reasons. With the lease option, at least the way that the lease is priced today, you can wrap in a battery with your solar and still get them a monthly payment that's on par with their current electric bill. And then essentially they're getting the emergency backup benefits for free. So I think there's a compelling offer to be made there as well, particularly in places like Florida, Texas, where you have frequent power outages, frequent disruptions to the electric grid. There's a lot of folks that I deal with there that are very much, preparedness and resiliency minded. And I see this as a great solution to help them to become energy independent as well, in a way that's cash flow neutral, or better.
Yeah, I think this is a really, like you said, I think this is pretty unprecedented and a really cool element of the lease as well. I mean, the concern about, well, what happens if something, happens with my battery, knowing that it's covered in the lease and that Sunnova will replace the battery is a huge feature that makes a lease much, much, much more compelling. Now, I think we can probably get into at some point, Joe, and talk about, what are some downsides of the leases and stuff as well, because up to this point, we've talked tons about how amazing it is. And quite frankly, I think the leasing really, truly today probably does rank above the other options. But to Solar Guy's question a little bit earlier, there's going to be pros and cons to everything. And so you got to kind of consider and know what are the pros, what are the cons, and how do you want to put, position that as well. Edward, this kind of goes to the question you were asking just a little bit ago, but what does the maintenance consist of? So as Joe kind of talked about here, a lot of, if there is maintenance, if there is, system repairs, things that need to be done, that'll all be covered by Sunnova in that respect. And then one thing I'm not entirely sure of, Joe, and maybe you might know the answer to this, but for maybe homeowners in California where it's more common that they will have, solar panel cleaning on a once or twice a year basis, I would have to imagine that that's probably something Sunnova covers in some capacity as well, given the fact that Sunnova is guaranteing the production of the system is, also. So if there was an issue where, panels were covered with dirt or whatever might be the case, right? There hasn't been any rain or something. I'd have to imagine that either A, Sunnova will cover the cost for cleaning, or B, in your contract, there's a reimbursement clause or, something that settles up. Hey, we guarantee this performance at hit here and we owe you for that delta. Do you know anything specifically about that, Joe?
No, it's a good question. So the issue of like dusting on the solar panels, it's not really something that we deal with here on the East Coast. We get enough regular rain here that the rain pretty much does the work for us as far as keeping the solar panels clean. I've never had to do any sort of cleaning on mine. But in California, as we get more projects out there, I'll certainly keep you guys updated on this issue. I'm not aware of any of my clients that have had to do any out-of-pocket cost for solar panel cleaning. Dan, I don't know. I know you have a handful of California clients as well, but I've never had any of my clients ever share with me about having to pay out of pocket for cleaning.
Yeah. Yeah, just thought it
Yeah.
would be a good question. But yeah, that's a common thing that I know I do hear from time to time. But like you said, depending on your location, sometimes it's a mute point because Mother Nature does all the cleaning that would be necessary. So just something
Yep.
worth talking about.
No, good question though. But Dan, I think you raised kind of a nice pivot there earlier, which is okay. We've been kind of talking about all the benefits of the lease. So what are the downsides? And let me illustrate. I'm going to screen share another one of my browser windows here, and I want to.
And while you're pulling that up, Joe, I hope everybody that's tuning in is getting good value out of the content here today. Appreciate a lot of the comments. Keep them coming. If you have other questions, not just particular to the Sunnova lease or leasing in general, but anything about solar products, technologies. I mean, it literally could be quite anything. The reason we're here, as Joe oftentimes kicks off our weekly conversation, is we want to provide maximum value to you guys. I want to have a place where you guys can ask questions and kind of treat this as a sales team huddle in a way, and just try to help elevate the entire industry. So anyway, Joe, let's jump back in here to what we're sharing.
Yeah, no, thanks for throwing that in there, Dan. So I'm showing a page from a proposal that I actually sent a homeowner in Jacksonville, Florida, earlier today. And first point, just to kind of reiterate, this is the first year lease payment, what it would be for this system if the homeowner purchased this system. And just for comparison's sake, if they went with traditional solar loan financing, the payment was going to be over $140 per month. So you can see the cash flow difference there, $99 versus $140. However, what you will notice is that the monthly payments go up each year. And this is what's called an escalator. So when you structure your lease, you have the option to include an escalator, right? Which is a certain percentage that the monthly payment increases year after year after year. Now, you can choose to set the escalator at 0, where it's just going to be a flat payment for the entire lease term, or you can set an escalator, 1%, 2%, or even 3%, where the monthly payment increases year over year. Now, the trade-off here is if you want to offer a lower initial monthly payment, then you set a higher escalator. Again, this assumes you don't change the price. Let's assume you already set the price. And by the way, this is the way it works, guys. When you price out these systems, you essentially just price it out as if it were a cash deal. You tell the leasing company, hey, pay the contractor this amount for the project. And so you should have, by that point, you should know how you would want to price it, so that the contractor and their EPC costs, the sort of the below the red line costs, are covered, and then you know what your commission is. But once you have that job priced out, okay, this is how much we need to pay the installation contractor, you then provide that number to the leasing company, and then tell the leasing company what, if any, escalator you're willing to offer with the lease. So for this particular lease offer, it has a 1.9% escalator, which means, from year to year, you're seeing the monthly payment go up by 1.9%. Now, what that allows the lease company to do is offer a lower initial monthly payment. But as you can see, the monthly income on the lease goes up and up and up as you get further into the lease term. So the terminal payment on this is $155 a month in year 25, compared to $99 a month in year 1. Now, if I had set this escalator at 0, the initial monthly payment probably would be closer to $120 or $130 a month. So I don't know if this is a downside, but this is a reality of the lease, is that most leases will have an escalator. However, this escalator is generally lower than the rate of retail electric rate inflation. And so again, if you're making this offer, you're structuring this offer to maximize cash flow savings for the buyer, then even with the escalator, they're going to have such a delta in their lower monthly payment that even in year 25, their lease payment is probably just approaching parity with what their current electric bill is today. So I don't know if it's a downside, but that is the reality of the lease. Is many of the leases do include an escalator.
Yeah,
Dale,
I
I'll
think
kick it back
I
to
think
you.
that's a really important point because as we've talked about before, in our sales process, there's a big part of the sales process that's what we call the kill the bill, right? So you're showing and you're articulating to a homeowner, hey, this is what your utility company has done historically. Across the country, most of the time, that number is a 4% per year escalation, is what we've typically seen from data publicly. That's all U.S. Bureau of Labor and Statistics data of a 4% national rate of increase for electricity. But then we'll also talk about what local changes have happened. Maybe you're in FPL territory where rates jumped up over 10% this year, or maybe you're San Diego Gas and Electric where rates have gone up exponentially. I mean, all of California, right? There's a lot of places where you can pull that data. So we want to show that and articulate that. And so when we come back and we talk about the lease, okay, yeah, you could say that part of it is a downside, that there's an escalating monthly payment increase. But as Joe was saying, your year one monthly payment, oftentimes it's so much lower than what your current monthly payment is, right? So let's just say in this example, we have a $99 monthly payment in the power bill. Joe, do you recall what the power bill was? $150 for this customer at that time?
I think this one's $140 a month or so average.
140. Okay, right. So the homeowner seeing a $40 immediate bill reduction. But then if you show it to them properly, 140 with 4% increase next year goes to X. And what we typically will show is a 5-year mark, a 10-year mark, and then we'll jump out to 25 years. But of course, we could show every single year. Our software does that, but we'll highlight those points to them. So even with the rate escalations, truth be told, actually, when the rate escalator, and this is just basic math, but when the rate escalator is less than what the rate of inflation number is, their savings proportionally is actually better every single year, despite the fact their payment is going up. At year 5, their payment's gone from 99 up to 110 or whatever it is, but their power bill would have gone up even higher proportionally. So their savings is better year 1 to year 2 to year 3 and year 4. So it kind of becomes a moot point. I would say that maybe if you're working with a customer that really wants that idea of just having a total flat fixed monthly payment for the long haul, then maybe that's a good scenario to consider a low interest rate, higher dealer fee, flat financing. But there's other variables that have to be considered in that too of, well, hey, if you're adding a battery, you're on the hook for the cost. If something happens, you're on the hook for the cost. Assuming your contractor's still in business, maybe they'll take care of it for you. But if they're not, then what? So I think if you were kind of doing a very classic Venn diagram pros and cons list, the pros are very largely adding up for the lease. In the cons, you can always find something to be a negative. But I think if we're looking at it very objectively, the lease side of it pencils out really, really well, and it makes a lot of sense.
Yeah, and just to give you some context, folks, 70%. When I talk to my partners in Florida right now, that's where we're doing the Sunnova product most, is in Florida markets. 70% of the business coming in right now is on the lease, right? So if 70% is on the lease, a small portion is always cash. Call it 10, 20%. That means that the percentage of people using actually solar loans to finance now is very, very small. This is the product that's getting deals closed. I mean, that's really the long and short of it. Those of you who are in the business here, you know that as a whole, our industry has had a slowdown with the higher interest rates and with NEM3 in California. But the deals that are being done right now, this is the product that's getting these deals done. And so again, and the escalator with the lease, it's there, but it's certainly better. Going back to our earlier point, anything that we offer on this is going to be better than sticking with the power company.
Exactly.
Yep.
Delroy, I know you dropped a comment in here. Appreciate the comment. He's one of our students as well, and enrolled dealers with us in the Solar Surge dealer program. Does the lease option commission work the same as the cash as well? It does. So essentially what Joe was explaining a little bit earlier, the way you price the lease is effectively pricing it on the cash price. So you're essentially putting in, this is the cash price, and then the leasing companies will apply their effective markup or their effective financial calculations they need to financially engineer what that looks like from an agreement perspective. But at the end of the day, what you priced in there at a cash price, let's just say for the sake of an easy conversation, it was a $25,000 quoted system. And, 20,000 of that was supposed to go to the install company for building and generating the project. Well, that $5,000 delta there would have been earned as a sales commission. in that particular scenario. So you would have priced it the same thing, same way you would have a cash deal, and then Sunnova or the leasing company would apply in their markups as needed to deliver the monthly payment terms to the customer. That's one thing that is a little bit different in leasing, is you're not getting a grand total number. You're getting a total from a truth in lending perspective of, hey, this is how much money you will pay over the term of your lease, right? They're going to take your monthly payments from year one and then year two, and they're going to add all of them up for the 300 months. But you're not getting a contract that says this is what I'm signing for, because it doesn't work that way in the lease. You're effectively signing for the payment and the escalation, and here's what you're committed to over that period of time.
Exactly right. Exactly right. So Delroy, it's super simple as far as calculating the contract price or the cash price. You're not technically signing a purchase agreement for a particular price. You're just telling the leasing company, in this case Sunnova, you're saying, hey, Sunnova, pay the EPC company this amount, right? And so Sunnova will pay the contractor just like a cash customer would write a check and pay the contractor. And so as long as you tell them the right amount, then you know what they're going to take for their construction cost and what's going to be your commission. And so once you've provided that information to Sunnova, they will then wrap that with a lease offer. So Dan's exactly right. There is no contract price per se, because you're not transacting at a particular price. You're agreeing to make monthly payments on a pre-agreed schedule, which is what I was showing you there earlier. Is like, this is the payment schedule that you're signing up for. And on that note, I should say too, is that with a leased system, the lease agreement is the contract, right? You're not going to have a traditional solar purchase contract the way you would with a loan or with a cash customer. The lease agreement itself is the contract. And so in addition to telling the leasing company what the price is, right, what the price they need to pay the installer is, you're also giving them all the equipment details, make and model of solar panels, make and model of inverters, roof pitch, azimuth, TSRF, which is like the solar resource factor, the efficiency of that roof surface. Now, these are all numbers that you can pull from Aurora. The process that we teach here, of course, at Solar Surge is for the sales reps to know how to do the designs themselves so they can pull all those numbers. But you do provide all that data to the leasing company, as well as the price to pay the installer, and then they will wrap that in a lease and then send the lease proposal or the lease agreement to the client. So I see we have another question here from Team Chip asking, so what happens at year 25? Ownership is now passed on to the customer. So one of two things typically happens here, Team Chip. Typically, you will have an option to buy the equipment for some nominal amount once you've reached the end of the 25-year lease term. Or contractually, the leasing company could come back and reclaim the equipment. Now, in practice, I think that's very impractical, because I'm just thinking as a contractor, knowing what I know about this business, 25 years from now, there's not going to be hardly any real market, like remarket value for that solar equipment. It's probably going to cost you more to send a crew to come out there and dismantle the equipment and transport it back than it would to just leave it there. So I think what you're probably going to find more often than not is that the homeowner is if they choose, is just buying out the equipment at the end of the lease term for some insignificant amount. Dan, any thoughts or any perspective on that?
Yeah, no, I think that's well said. And there was another question that just came in that I think kind of coincides and piggybacks with this one, which was from David Orcutt here. Thank you both for the awesome content. Yeah, absolutely, it's our pleasure. Can the homeowner buy out the lease sooner than the 25-year early payoff? What if the homeowner moves in year 8? So I think it kind of goes along with Team Chip's conversation there. The first part is, if the homeowner does move, there is transferability. So there's the ability for, assuming the new owner qualifies under Sunnova or whoever the bank and the lending institution's requirements are, if they qualify, they can pick up on that lease, which oftentimes, if it's done properly, if you work with the right real estate agent and you help the real estate agent in the process, can add value to the home, which is a win-win for everybody. I do also believe that there's other terms that go into some of the leases where if a homeowner moves, there's obligations that the homeowner can have, but Sunnova can come back out and remove the equipment. You have to settle up a certain amount. There's typically going to be a certain amount of monies that might need to be paid in order for the lease to then be terminated, which in practice, again, means most of the time you're going to go the route of transferring to a new owner versus spending money to have it removed. It's not really practical. It is a value add to the property. And most of the time, people that are purchasing homes with solar are seeking it out because they're seeing, oh, hey, yeah, my bills are going to be less with this house. It already has solar. So there are terms for that, but I think in practice, most of the time, it's going to be a transfer of the lease to the next homeowner.
Correct. Correct. Now, some leasing companies do have the option to buy it out on a certain pre-negotiated schedule. Sunnova doesn't do it that way, but there are other leasing companies where they will tell you like, hey, at year 10, here's your price to buy out the lease. At year 20, here's your price, and all of that is specified on the lease contract. Sunnova doesn't do it that way, but I think as Dan said, what you're going to find most people, if they want that solar home and they want the benefit of the lower electric bill, they'll just go ahead and qualify themselves as the new buyer to take over the lease. And if they're qualified for the home mortgage, chances are they have no problem credit qualifying to take over the lease agreement.
Yeah, I know sometimes, Joe, that's a little bit of an objection. It doesn't matter whether it's lease, financing, or ownership of a solar system. Sometimes an objection that a homeowner will throw out there, and I think it's not a weak objection. It's a good question, but a lot of times I sometimes find that it feels like the objection they're throwing out because they just have to ask something. And what if I move? Right. Well, it's like, hey, first, on a practical basis, if I'm a buyer interested in a particular home and I know that I want a pool or I know that I want something, I'm looking for those things. So if I so adamantly knew that I didn't want solar, I wouldn't entertain looking at the house with solar. Right. There's a lot of other options out there. One thing that we haven't had a problem with, at least in recent years in the real estate market, is inventory sitting around for a long time. I mean, even with interest rates the way they are now, homes are still selling aggressively. Now, whether or not people want to sell, that's a separate conversation. But so I think at the end of the day, I think as the technology advances, as the popularity of EVs, solar, and just kind of this general conversation continues to advance, the likelihood of the objection of, I like your house, but take the solar panels off, because I think that's kind of what people are saying. Like, is that the worst case scenario? I just don't see that really truly being a reality, right? I mean, I think people are seeking it out. The data supports it. There's Zillow statistics on resale value. And I think ultimately, again, energy costs are going to keep rising. So if you can own this house, pick up on the lease, here's your payment, here's the payment schedule, here's what your power bill would have been otherwise. It's a pretty no-brainer economic thing. Not to mention, maybe the attraction here again to the lease is you don't have any maintenance. Sunnova is responsible for any issues that happen. If there's a battery involved, they're going to replace it at year X, right? I mean, there's a ton of value that adds in there to really kind of maybe push that purchasing of your home over the edge, and make the new buyer super ecstatic about buying your house and hopefully buying it above asking price, right? So anyway, I hear that from time to time. I just don't think it's a real legitimate concern, especially won't be as the years progress.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, people buy what they want. That's the truth of the matter is people buy what they want. They might justify it to themselves many different ways. They can justify the price, the cash flow, the return on investment. But at the end of the day, people buy what they want. People buy solar because they want solar. People buy a solar home because they want a solar home. I know we're getting down to the wire on time here, Dan, but I saw another question come in here from Lance B asking, are you using Aurora for Sunnova proposals? Does SolarSurge have team pricing for reps using Aurora? So thanks for that question, Lance. So we do have an enterprise plan with Aurora here at SolarSurge. So that's one of the things that we provide to all of our enrolled dealers. That's not a cost that you have to bear on your side as an enrolled dealer. It's something that we actually teach to do all of your designs in Aurora at the time of sale. It's really one of our philosophies, one of our core values, to have the most accurate information at the time of sale, to support that professional sales process. So Lance, I don't know if you're considering enrolling in the program or looking at coming on board with us, but that is one of the things that we make sure that all of our reps have. And then once you have the system built in Aurora, it's very simple to pull those numbers that you need. Again, it's basically solar panel make, model, inverter make, model, and then roof pitch, azimuth, and TSRF. And you can pull all those from Aurora, plug them into the leasing company, and then generate your offer there.
Yeah. And there also is too, maybe to kind of elaborate on that a little bit more, and Lance, to answer your question, I've been investigating it, working on it a little bit. There are the ability to build in some of the leasing products into Aurora kind of natively, where you can use Aurora. What we do is we use Aurora as our actual proposal presentation tool. And then once we've articulated and presented the numbers, then in this case, we might have to jump off of Aurora over to Sunnova to run the applications and stuff like that. But you can represent the Sunnova pricing in Aurora to have a nice clean proposal, nice clean proposal tool, and then jump off platform, so to speak, when you need to actually run the application. So that's a little bit of our process there.
Yep. And real quick here, Edward, I know you had posed this question earlier. The answer is yes, you can bundle in roof work. You can bundle in other non-solar items as well, especially batteries. Batteries are kind of in a separate class now, but you can bundle in other non-solar items, roofs, energy efficiency packages, things that complement the solar installation. There are limits, so you have to delineate what is solar and what is these add-on items. So there are certain limits, but a roof repair or roof replacement is one of those common ones. So, well, folks, it looks like we're at the end of the hour here. But again, we are here every Wednesday, 3 p.m. Eastern time for the Solar Surge live training. If you haven't done so already, go ahead and grab the free download below, which is the 3-step virtual sales process that we use here at Solar Surge. Same process that I use personally. It walks you through how to do an initial discovery, an initial needs analysis, and then how to structure your pitch, how to structure your presentation, and follow up and win the deal. So go ahead and grab that if you haven't done so already. That will also put you on our email mailing list so that as we have the live trainings and the other events that go out, you'll get notified for them so you can get them onto your calendar. But I thank you guys for spending another hour here with Solar Surge on the live training. We will see you here same time next week, and we look forward to working with you again soon.